Okay, so previously we had looked at the Manel, Tuttle, Brown, McInerney 1996 HMDA dataset. We had loaded in that data into Google Colab, this environment. We had installed Tidyverse package. We had applied Tidyverse using the glimpse verb. We had examined the data set and we had performed some analysis using Python, and we had reported some descriptive statistics. But importantly, we also had looked at the prima facie evidence that there had been, at least on the surface, it would appear that racism is important in determining the individual's success in getting mortgage approval. And so the figures that we pulled out using the summary command in R, we were able to, when we looked at the deny for the entire sample, which was a sample of 2,381, what we observed is for the entire sample, 11% were rejected. So using this combination of numbers, 12% were rejected for mortgage approval. When we took just the African and Latino population in the sample, that cohort had a rejection rate of 28. And when we took everybody else, which I summarized as being white, the rejection rate was 9%. So on the surface, this would really strongly suggest that there is a racial component. Where the analysis then has to be extended is perhaps we should look at other factors like credit risk factors, creditworthiness. And so then that leads us into including in variables like credit scores, mortgage credit scores, public bad credit record, and loan to value ratios, so on. So we have a summary here directly from the paper, what the credit scores represent. It goes from 1 to 6. And if we look at the distribution of the credit scores using this ggplot2 command, we can see that the bulk of people have 1. That's the best credit score. A few have 6, and then in between there's a bit less. We can use Python to pull out the same graph. We kind of find that there's a funny number here. We'll explore that a little bit later, but maybe take a quick look in at our CSV file. So if we double click here, just open that up, one of the things that we can observe, the very last observation in our data set here is has a reading for the credit score of 2.11, mortgage credit score of 1.72. That seems very suspicious because it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Likewise 6, and also here mortgage credit score should range 1 to 4, but whole numbers, never numbers that are in between, right? Full whole numbers. So we can apply some graphing, and we note that and also that we can see the distribution. The biggest number of credit scores are 1, then 2, then 6, 5, 3, and 4, and then we can order that going from 1 to 6, and of course we reproduce this graph. That's an R. Let's close down our CSV file for a moment, and we can take a look at the credit scores. And again, we can observe a little bit the distribution. They go from 1 to 4. Again, the higher the mortgage credit score here, the poorer our it means that there is some kind of issue in terms of 1 is no late payment, 2 is no payment history, 3 is if 1 or 2 late payments, and 4 would be if more than 2 late payments are on the mortgage, right? So so mortgage score can be relevant here as well. And of course, if we're trying to determine the creditworthiness, these would be metrics that we would include in. So we can do some graphing here. Obviously, we're getting a funny number again. That's the very last observation. Would appear it seems to be somehow corrupted. Or we can use facet wrap. So we use a bar chart here. We break apart the no and the yes. So mortgage approved would be no, denied. So deny no is approved, and deny yes is where we have the individual is rejected. So we're finding that a lot of the time for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we should exclude this case. Most of the time we're having mortgage approved, but the ratio then reduces. So it's overwhelming. If you have a credit score of 1, overwhelmingly you will be approved. Likewise, maybe 2, but then there seems to be a bit of a deterioration looking at those numbers. Now, of course, it's frustrating then. This is an aberration. We'll get rid of that and we'll rename the data set all. Now, it doesn't get written out here. Perhaps I should, so that we can use that for Python. And maybe I'll put that command in, but let's just run and exclude the HMDA. So the very last observation that we had is removed. And then if we look at that new object that we create is all, and so that's the data set that we're using, right? So when we run the ggplot2 commands, the data we're referring to is the HMDA, but we exclude the final observation because it's a bit corrupt here. Then we perform a facet, so we do a bar chart, right? And then we do facet wrap, and we have on the horizontal axis, we have mortgage denial for varying credit scores. That's the title. So it's on the horizontal axis, it's yes, denied, no, approved, right? No, deny means you were approved. And we run that, and again, we can see a little bit more striking evidence that higher credit score, so 6 high credit score would mean, the 6 here means that your creditworthiness is poor. And we can look at the ratios, and we can also, because we've included in our analysis fill black and it's a factor, we can scrutinize, we can drill down into an extra layer and consider the racial element in terms of linking credit scores to whether mortgages were denied or approved, and then looking at the racial component. And you can see a little bit more evidence here that there's a stronger preponderance of African American and Latino in the credit score 6. And so maybe there is some evidence here to suggest that race, while important, there are other factors linked to creditworthiness that may be significant here. We look at the public record of credit problems. When we incorporate that in, we observe that the mortgage denial for varying credit scores and public bad credit record, those who had public bad credit record, again, there's a higher preponderance down here. Some individuals who had those records, it's a 1-0, they did manage to secure a mortgage, but there is a higher preponderance down here. That's what might be expected. But even sometimes when you have that lien, maybe a tax lien against you, or there's money outstanding that you owe, remember that the any public record of credit problems, if you owe taxes or so on, that's a blemish on your creditworthiness, and shouldn't, all else being equal, adversely affect. And we can see that there's a correlation between public bad credit record and credit scores. If you have a public bad credit score, it doesn't mean you won't get a mortgage, but we can see how down here it does play against you, right? And it serves here against you. So at the margin, it seems to be important. Credit scores also would seem to be important in terms of whether you are successful in securing a mortgage. But it would appear also you can have a low credit score. In other words, you can have a poor credit score, should I say, and you can have a public bad credit record and still obtain a mortgage. So none of these factors will eliminate you entirely from getting a mortgage. Even at first glance, we would say a mortgage credit score of 6, a credit score of 6 and a public bad credit record finding against you, people still were able to secure mortgages despite that, right? Okay, so we can take a glimpse at all, and what we observe is we have eliminated one of the observations. So we started with HMDA or HDMA data of 2,381. We now have 2,380. Now this all is not affecting what we have here. We could write it out, and I'll just go through exactly how we might do that. Okay, so if we create some new data set, perhaps we want to make it available here in this environment in our content folder. So if I'm just going to take a template from another project, we can say call our file all, and we can write out, so we can take the all file, the object that we created, and then write that out or make it available in the content folder. So let's just run that and see. It should appear here, but it won't appear immediately. Normally there's a little bit of latency when we open that up, so we may not see it immediately, and we might have to wait a second before that actually appears. And it took about a minute for that to pop up. So it depending on your internet speed and so on, but this data now has been written out, and if we want, we can download it, and it'll go into our downloads. And because I've already used that before, that file name, it's appearing as all one. But if I open it up, you can see we have we should have 2,380, and the last observation has been removed. Okay, so that write.csv is quite useful, and it means then we can use our function here, right? We can use our write.csv to make available that, and we can also read it into Python if we were using Python. So for instance, if we come back for a moment to our file, and instead of having HDMA, if I want to remove this, we just put in all. Now I have to be careful also, that won't do it. We need to also put in read in our file into the Google, into the Python environment. So we need PD reader, and we get that command just here. So we want to read that command in. We could do it this way, I suppose. So copy, selection, come down, and just before where we had written out the right CSV just here. We can say a new, Control V, read in all CSV, all. So this is going into the Python environment that we're running concurrently, and then all here as well, just to get some basic descriptive statistics. So they've come out, and we can see now we're down to 2,380, so that's correct. And then if we run this instead of HDMA, if I run with the old data set, that will remove this observation here. So let's just try that. And it's come out and it's clean, right? Again, we could do it here. We run it again, and we'll clean out that funny value that was corrupting. Okay, so we've looked at the mortgage credit scores, and it makes sense to map to also here write in all MCS, and we can look at the mortgage credit scores 1, 2, 3, and 4. That tallies what we observed in R, and again, that's cleans up. So the all here cleans up our data, and we remove the very last applicant, and we have more credible graphing.